Hello everyone, this is Al Fadi, and we'd like to welcome you back to another episode of this new series that we have titled Gibson's Latest Discoveries. As you have noticed so far, myself and Dr. J. Smith have been going through newer discoveries that Dan Gibson is coming across as it relates to Petra, Mecca, and really anything that relates to the possible location and even history and geography of original Islam as compared to what we know traditionally. And this is why those discoveries are extremely important, because as you will see today, we're going to even talk about things that are associated with traditional rituals that Muslims associate with the surrounding area of modern-day Mecca, where in fact Gibson is arguing that those particular rituals actually originated from areas surrounding Petra. With me here in studio is Dr. J. Smith. Welcome back, brother.
Thanks to have me. It's good to be back again. I'm so glad that we're continuing these discoveries that Gibson will continue to find, and it's fascinating because as he continues to find these, we need to start introduce them to you, the audience. And we went through already the Kaaba. We also looked at what we know as the Safa and Marwa hills. As you say, you've been there, you've done it, and they were not really hills, they're just rocks. But these were actual mountains that have been discovered, and we now see are the original Safa and Marwa. It looks like these are the original Safa and Marwa there in Petra. Let's move on then to the Zamzamwell. Now, you've been to Mecca. Let's take a look at, and put the slide up there. You can see the Zamzamwell in Mecca. You've seen that, haven't you?
That's true, but once you get there these days, you'll see like the image below it, technically speaking, where the people are like you see drinking or washing or things like that. But I mean, the encasement as we are seeing it and the well itself, you can take a look at that, of course.
Now, today, because there's millions of people that go to Mecca, they have to bring in the water from outside and to accommodate. But Patricia Crone brought this up. She said that when she looked at the archaic references to Mecca, you could see that even in that time of the 7th or 8th century, there is no reference to Mecca at all. It didn't even come up. She didn't come up until the 8th century. 741 was when she first found the first reference. And still today, no one's been able to find any closer, or I'm sorry, not closer, but earlier date than 741. But what she noticed is that this area of Mecca could not accommodate large caravans because there was no water there.
Right.
The Zamzam well here, when you look at it, you'll see it's the modern day well, but no one's done any historical study on it. No one knows how old it is. There's not much water there, and the whole area had no water whatsoever. And so this is fascinating that she brought this up, that this is one of the difficulties with considering this as Mecca as the original source for these stages of the Hajj. And we're looking at the stages of the Hajj. When you look at the next slide, let's take a look at the next slide. There you can see when you go to Petra, there's all kinds of water. And what's more, there are entire water systems that have been carved into the rock. You can see them in the pictures there. They're still there today. You can see that the Petrans knew well how to do wells. And you can see a well up on the upper right-hand corner.
Right.
That could be the original Zamzam well. There are so many of them there, we don't know which one would be actually it. But certainly, the combination of water and the fact that they had water and plenty of it, and the streams that it refers to in the traditions, support the Petran location, not the Meccan location. There are no streams at all going through Mecca. Did you see any streams there at all?
Oh, not at all. And I like really what you're mentioning, Jay. I mean, the first time when Gibson came up with the idea of Petra, I mean, everybody was kind of like taking him, with a great amount of doubt, But when you start adding these pieces together, is it a coincidence that everything that is being mentioned about these rituals and locations and specifics, all of it is found around that area? I mean, somebody has to start pondering these issues. It cannot be a coincidence.
No, let's take a look at this one, the Muzdalifah. Now, you've talked about the Muzdalifah, and you've talked about Arafat. You've talked about the mountain of Arafat. When they went up to there, when you did it, you actually prayed. You can see images of thousands of people. Can you see all those, the white cloth? They're all over the mountain there, and they have erected a pillar there.
Right.
You can see them at nighttime with the lights in the background on the right, and they're about 3 kilometers away from the Kaaba, I understand. It's quite a hike to get over there. And what is fascinating was this whole hill has been found in Petra. You can see at the bottom there. And if you look, there is a white temple that's on top.
Well, this is Arafat, of course. They're talking about the Mount Arafat.
There's Arafat there. And so what's fascinating is that this is a reproduction of what we now, it looks like, it could be the original one that they were looking at there in Mecca, also existed prior to that in Petra. Let's look at the next image, and this is the image I want to bring up here. You say that after you go to Muzdalifah or the Arafat, you come back to Muzdalifah, and there you start throwing rocks.
Yeah, I mean, you start really the official celebration, if you wish, of the sacrifice. The festival of the sacrifice, Al-Adha. And then it is after you offer the sacrifice and people begin to celebrate, on account of that. Yes, you go and you stone specific locations that are marked by pillars these days.
But there's a picture of them up at the top. You can see there are 3 of them.
And this is the modern way, of course, of doing it. It used to be also white pillars.
There used to be white pillars. Right. They were then reproduced by these big pillars you see on the left.
Yeah, in my days it was white pillars, actually.
And there's 3 of them.
Right.
Why 3?
Well, here's the tradition. The tradition is that Abraham was taking his son, going to offer him as a sacrifice, and Satan basically would try to stop him. And every time he would do this, he will stone him 7 times. That's the first pillar. Then he tries again. He stoned him 7 times. 7 times. That's the second pillar. Then he tried the 3rd time, and he stoned him the 7 times. And that's the location of the 3rd pillar. That's pretty much why.
Okay, now what we have found is, if you look in that upper right-hand corner, they have now been encased in huge buildings, right. Enormous buildings, all air-conditioned and whatnot.
And they have a net that catches all of these stones anyway.
They catch all these stones. When Gibson went back to Petra, he found the exact same pillar, but only one. It was one pillar, which is what the traditions talk, because there's only one devil. There's only one Satan. Right. So what they have taken, that one pillar, there you can see the base of it. It's no longer a pillar, it's no longer standing. That's where the base was that they used to throw stones at. And it was around 49 or 72 multiplications of 7 that they would stone this pillar, stoning the devil, Satan. Only one devil. I don't know of more than one Satan. I always thought there was only one Satan. But it's fascinating. That has now been incorporated into 3. So that has been, they've actually enlarged on the original tradition. And you can see they're quite a ways apart now. In fact, they're even further apart now as they get more and more modern, because they need to accommodate the large, huge crowds.
Right.
But I'm not going to quibble at that. What I think is fascinating, that exact same practice was originally done in Petra. So that which was originally done in Petra has now been brought to Mecca. And what that says is that it looks like this is not a pagan rituals, because I remember when we were questioning this many years ago, even when I was first questioning this in a debate that I had on a university, I was questioning whether or not these are nothing more than pagan practice, because they don't make sense. Why would you go 7 times around a square building? Why would you run back and forth 7 times between Safa and Marwa? Why would you then go up this hill and pray? And stay there all night? Then why would you come down and throw stones of multiplications of 7 at a pillar, 3 pillars, and then why would you drink now today it's become almost like a magical water from this one well called Zamzamwell, unless of course they're not creating this from something that happened in Hijaz. This is basically reproducing what already had existed, that these were quite well known there in Petra. All of these functions were well known in Petra, and they're just taking it and reproducing the very same rituals down in Mecca, 600 miles further south. Now, to understand that, we need to go back to this idea of the place. And remember, we talked about once you create a man, which means once you introduce him there in the Dome of the Rock, in chapter 112 of the Quran. You introduce him on the inner ambulatories. You also introduce this man,
Muhammad. The mosque itself in chapter 17 or 112 about the God himself?
Where it says in chapter 112 that neither do we beget nor we begotten, that right. Allah is his prophet, exactly. And truly Muhammad is his servant or his representative. So that's in chapter 112. Did I say 12 or did I say 112?
Well, 112 doesn't really add about Muhammad, but it is actually perceived that there is no God but Allah, and therefore from there, you add the Shahadah.
So the Shahadah is added at that time, which is interesting that you're bringing that up, because what we have just found now, we can't find that second part. The two together in one verse.
I challenge Muslims all the time on my Facebook page about this, and they won't find it.
And so when we were talking about the Dome of the Rock, we brought that up. This is something that has only been found. You can't find the two together, the Shahadah, in this book. But let's get back to this idea of once you introduce the man, you introduce a man on the rock, you introduce them at Dome of the Rock, you introduce them on the protocols, the caliphal protocols, and then we see this. Yehuda Nevo has done this with his work by looking at the protocols from the Sufyanid period up to the Marwanid period. Marwan the first, who then creates the Marwan family, his son Abdul Malik. Abdul Malik is the one who has these protocols, and nowhere on any of these protocols from 661 all the way up to 691. So for 30 years, as Yehuda Nevo says, there's no reference to any people called Muslim. There's no reference to any religion called Islam. There's no reference to any man called Muhammad. There's no reference to any book called the Quran. And there's no reference to any place called Mecca, which you would think there would be reference to all these five things if this really were Muslim text. If this was, not a text, but a Muslim caliph. If this was a caliph, as they all tell us these are Muslim caliphs, why don't they refer to the book, the man, the place, and the religion, and the people? And they don't. None of them do. Until 691. Right. The protocols almost overnight, according to you had Neville, now introduce Muhammad as a prophet. They introduce also the Shahadah as we know, and the Bismillah. Bismillah al-Rahman al-Rahim. That Bismillah, which you now see in the Surah 1 in the Fatiha, is now introduced there on those protocols. Now, that means you've got the man, and you need to have the place. The place, obviously, and we need to look back and we need to look and see what was happening historically. When you look back historically, this is during the time of Abdul Malik. Ibn Zubair was his man in charge of Petra. What does he do? He rebels against his Umayyad masters, and he destroys the Kaaba. And that's why you can see it. Nothing's left but the foundation that's there today. He destroys the Kaaba. This is known as the Second Civil War. And he then takes the Black Rock. Now, no one's talking about this Black Rock, but it's there in the traditions. He takes the Black Rock and he flees out of Petra with the Black Rock. Right. We know quite a bit about the Black Rock from the Nabateans, because the Black Rock is a Nabatean rock, and that rock is where the Black Rock is God's presence. So by taking the Black Rock, he takes God's presence out of Petra. This is the meaning that goes with it. That's why it's so significant. People then, he took it down south. We don't know where he took it down south. Obviously, it seems like he took it to Mecca.
Right, because that's where we find it.
That's where we find it now, and that's where he's from. Right. The Black Rock stood there, and they must have been put there, but what happened is people started going to the Black Rock, because it makes sense. That's where God's presence is. So they start to go to the Black Rock. Ibn Zubair needed to have allies. Right. And so he goes and he allies himself with the Abbasids, who are way up in what is Baghdad today in Iraq. Thus begins now suddenly the Abbasids want to have him as an ally because he owns the Black Rock. Since he has the Black Rock and all these people are starting to go to the Black Rock, interestingly, in 697 then, look at the date now, in 697 the Meccan Inscription is erected. It's still there today. It's about 60 kilometers outside of Mecca. 40 miles outside of Mecca, you have this Meccan Inscription, dated to 697, and it says that the Masjid al Haram was constructed then. The Masjid al Haram is constructed in 697. Hold on a minute. Isn't that what they're supposed to pray to in Surah 2, Ayah 149 and 145,
That's
150,
right.
According to the Quran?
That's right.
That they're supposed to now pray towards the Masjid al Haram? Well, how could it be constructed in Mecca in 697? If, according to the Quran, if the Quran is correct, if Muslims say the Quran is correct, this happened in 624. Remember we talked about that.
Right. And also, I mean, Jay, to tell the truth, is the Quran actually describes when this supposed change that took place in chapter 2 verses, let's say from 142 all the way down to 150. When this supposed change took place, it talks about someone who is confused about where to pray and which direction to pray, but now is given a specific location to pray towards. Why are we always fixated on the idea that it was towards Mecca? What if the prayer was intended somewhere else?
Well, I'm not going to say it right now because Gibson has just come back with some new material that I'm not permitted to introduce yet because he has to publish it about the Masjid al Haram. What we can say now is that this looks like this is a second Masjid Haram.
Right.
because there must have been an earlier one that the Quran's referring to that must have been somewhere else. Wait to the spring. We're going to introduce what this first masjid. Nonetheless, we do know that the Masjid al Haram is now erected in 697. And the reason it's erected there is because the black stone is there. Therefore, They want to have a building to house the black stone. And that's why the Kaaba then is introduced. And that's why, if you notice today, remember we've said this a number of times, architects who are now, archaeologists, who are going to the architects, who are building all these massive buildings all over the Kaaba, they're there to find out what's going to be dug up, because when you build large buildings, you dig great foundations.
That's right.
They can't find a thing. They haven't found a thing. The reason why they can't find a thing is there's no history there.
Yet you find a lot of things at the Petra site.
You find a lot of this at the Petra site. Now, we do, and I'm kind of, I don't want to say it yet, but he has found the Masjid al Haram in Petra. He has photographed it yet. We're going to have to wait back. I'm not permitted to say that. That's all I can say is much enough. Now, in 708, let's keep with the timeline. In 708, then, the Zamzamwell is suddenly lost. How can you lose a well? Well stays, right?
Of course.
The Zamzamwell is lost.
Unless somebody just buried it.
So there's a number of years where Al-Tabari doesn't talk about that. The Zamzamwell suddenly just doesn't, no references left. It's just completely out of all the traditions. And then, obviously, this must have been that this was the Zamzamwell in Petra that was lost. And then suddenly reappears in Mecca.
Could it be it was lost because of the destruction that took place in there by the earthquake?
That happens in 713.
Okay.
In 713, remember, it's after 708, we have no reference to the well. In 713, we do know that there's a huge earthquake, which destroys what's left of Petra, including much of probably the Zamzam well, it's the original Zamzam well. Now, what's fascinating is it suddenly then appears in Mecca. This is the Zamzam well that we show pictured earlier that everybody's going to today. Now, we haven't found any mosques facing Mecca until 727. And that makes sense now, because once the Abbasids start having pilgrims go to this place where Ibn Zubair now is, then you can then see why they would want to build a Masjid al Haram in this location in 697, so that they now are a competing sanctuary, competing with Petra, which is declining because the black stone is no longer there. The black stone's now in Mecca.
And the temple was destroyed, and now the whole town or area is being destructed also.
Meanwhile, before that, you have Alhajjaj, who is the governor of Iraq, is given the responsibility by Abdul Malik to go and find Ibn Zubair and kill him, which he does. He goes and kills him. Then he returns home, and he decides that he is not going to, he realizes that, and we don't know his mind because he's not written this out. It looks like from his actions that he doesn't know whether he should now give allegiance to the Abbasids or whether he should give allegiance to the Umayyads. The Umayyads have their sanctuary in Petra. The Abbasids now have their sanctuary in Mecca. So what does he do? He builds his first mosque in 706. And where is it facing? Well, he says where it's facing. He calls it the Wasit Mosque.
In between.
In between. That's what it means in Arabic.
Right.
So he calls it Wasit, in between. There's nothing there that it's facing. There's no hill. There's no building. There's no town. There's no city. There's nothing. It's just sand. But it's the in-between mosque. And he builds a good another 19. So 20 of them are built. All mostly over Iraq. Wasit's over further to the east. All of them are facing within 1 degree of accuracy. That's how close they are. The most accurate qiblas are all in that in-between. That's a political statement.
Right.
That's exactly a political statement that was done. So those begin to appear in 706. Then they disappear once Al-Hajj dies. Once he dies, there's no longer now any reason to have the in-between mosque. Now they all start to face Mecca. Why? Because now the Abbasids are now in control. And they take over control by 749. Can you then understand now what's fascinating? Because in the Hadith, they tell us that there are 2 Meccas. Christian writers speak of the city in Paran in Jordan. Thus, is that the first Mecca? So it looks like that there is not just one Mecca, there are 2 Mecca. Now, they call it Petra, but the sanctuary, it looks like there are 2 sanctuaries. It looks like every area of the stages of the Hajj are found in first Petra, then in Mecca. We can find the waterways that are in Petra. Now this is Zamzam well, reproduced in the Zamzam well in Mecca. We find also the Kaaba, which has the exact dimensions that Al-Zrakri talks about when he talks about the dimensions of the walls. That parallels exactly what we see in Petra, not in Mecca. We see the Safa and Marwa tower, the two big mountains. The mountains do make sense if you're running between one another, not just between two rocks. That's found in Petra. And also we have the Muzdalifah, we also have the Jamarats, and we have the Arafat hill. All of them have been found in Petra long before Mecca.
That's awesome. And of course, I'm hoping that everybody who is watching right now is excited about all of this. Obviously, we still have more to unpack, and we will leave this until next time. Again, thank you so much, brother, and thank you for watching. God bless. Thank you for watching. Please like our video, and we encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Sira International. And be sure also to click the bell so that you receive notifications whenever we upload new videos into the channel. And finally, I like to prayerfully encourage you to become a patron through Patreon. Your giving is much needed and will enable us to produce more and more of videos like this so that we can publish them on a weekly basis. So thank you in advance.